Hello everyone, it is the Comics Kid 2099 and I am here to do another topic video. This time it is something very similar to my video Hulk and His Status Quos that I did about a month or so back. In my video about the Hulk, I discussed my realization that the Hulk doesn't really have a status quo that he sticks with for any length of time. People are familiar with the premise of the show from the 1980s, where he's traveling the country trying to lay low and he encounters trouble wherever he goes. Even though that's probably the most well-known premise for the Hulk, it was alarming to me how very seldom that is actually the core of the comic book. Sometime after recording my Hulk video, a similar epiphany hit me concerning the X-Men Wolverine. Where Hulk has a different status quo with each creator who comes on his title, Wolverine, it seems to me, doesn't have a status quo at all. The reason Wolverine shows up in so many series and guest appearances is because he is a popular character. Ever since I've been reading comics, I've been hearing people complain that he shows up in so many titles. My very first issue of X-Men that was not a back issue, someone in the letters page asked if Wolverine had to be in all of the X-Men titles. And even if everyone actually does think Wolverine is overexposed, he's still very clearly a popular character, and it is just good business sense to put him in as many comics as Marvel does, so they can sell that many more comic books. And honestly, I don't mind Wolverine having 2 or 3 ongoing series and being in the Avengers and in at least 2 X-Men teams, mostly because I don't feel obligated to buy every Wolverine comic. Even though I am something of a completist when it comes to the X-Men, to the point where I deliberately buy something that I know I am not going to enjoy, simply because it has an X on it, for some reason, I just don't feel that same obligation with Wolverine titles. I do, however, have a few Wolverine stories on my shelf. But in buying various Wolverine stories, I've noticed that when you ignore the good business practice of putting Wolverine in 5 or 6 titles each month, there really isn't a premise or any reason for Wolverine to be in these titles. Let me elaborate further. In the 1980s, when Wolverine's legendary miniseries created by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller came out, there was an explanation for that comic to exist. In the Uncanny X-Men title, Wolverine told Nightcrawler that he needed some time alone, and from that point, you could go directly to his 4-issue miniseries. And since that was a miniseries, you don't really need an air quotes premise for Wolverine. He's an X-Man, he fights with the X-Men, and for one time, he goes off on a solo adventure, which is chronicled in that miniseries. But then that story made lots of money for everyone concerned, and by the time the X-Men were living in Australia, Wolverine had his own ongoing series. By this point, there was a brand new setting for Wolverine in the form of Madripoor, which is the Japanese equivalent to any Humphrey Bogart / James Cagney film noir type story. And there was, once again, a story reason for Wolverine to be in Madripoor. The X-Men's mysterious ally Gateway was a teleporter, and he could teleport Wolverine to any place on the planet whenever Wolverine needed to be there. And Wolverine's actual reason for being in Madripoor is to keep an eye on the new crime lord of the island, who is where she is thanks to getting caught up in a fight the X-Men had with the Reavers. This is fine. Since I haven't read much of the Wolverine comics of the 1990s, I honestly don't know how long his days as an adventurer in Madripoor lasted, nor do I know what the story reason for Wolverine having his own title was once he stopped hanging around Madripoor. I started reading comics in the early 2000s. When I started reading, the Wolverine solo series seemed to exist just because it was understood by everyone that Wolverine liked to take month-long breaks away from the X-Men and go do dark, angsty solo stuff. There really wasn't a premise to his series. It was just a thing that everyone accepted because fans liked Wolverine enough to buy comics he showed up in, and the creators liked getting money from the fans, so they really weren't giving any thought to a reason that Wolverine would be in his own title, because when they didn't put thought into it, it still made money. Then House of M happened. This is relevant for Wolverine because for most of the character's history, his past was a mystery to the fans. Sure, Wolverine knew stuff from his past, but the 1990s established that there were large chunks of his life that were a mystery to him, mostly because of shadow government organizations that wiped his memory on multiple occasions. After House of M, thanks to magic, Wolverine now knew everything that had been a hazy blur to him before. So this required an entire new solo series for Wolverine. This was taking it a little far, if you ask me. Up to this point, Wolverine had been a member of several X-teams simultaneously, and it was even something of a running gag in various X-Men books. Also, he had been in the Avengers ever since Brian Michael Bendis came onto the title. But now Wolverine would continue to appear in his own solo series, simply titled Wolverine, and the new series, Wolverine Origins, was devoted to Wolverine cleaning house with different things that he only now knew about. Specifically, up to this point, he apparently didn't know that a mysterious shadowy figure called Romulus had been manipulating all of Wolverine's past behind the scenes. And as stupid as that sounds to me, at least Wolverine Origins had a premise. Wolverine is dealing with his past now that he knows about it, and it's hunting down the dude who made his life so miserable. Simple enough. So, what was the premise for the older Wolverine solo series? After House of M, Wolverine, the title, was dealing with the aftermath of Wolverine now knowing all of his past. So why couldn't the premise of Wolverine Origins, which was this very thing, have just been used in the title simply called Wolverine? Basically, the answer to all of this is money. The people who are behind the scenes of these comics aren't going to put unnecessary thought into Wolverine's reason for working solo if they can put zero thought into him and his solo series and still make money doing that. I imagine, after House of M and Daniel Way concluded his arc that tied Wolverine into Decimation, someone thought that this arc could sustain an entire series, and so they then passed the older Wolverine solo title on to Mark Guggenheim, while Daniel Way went on to do Wolverine Origins. Guggenheim had Wolverine deal with the aftermath of his incident that kicked off the Marvel Civil War. Regardless of how I felt of the execution of that story, the idea behind that story could only last for a single story. After this, Wolverine was written by Jeff Loeb, and we got the air quotes final battle between Wolverine and Sabretooth, with much unnecessary meddling in the pasts of both characters and something about a prophecy or something. Once again, regardless of how this story was received, the idea behind it is only enough to fuel a single story. Shortly after this, we had a story by Jason Aaron that spun out of the events of the X-Men crossover Messiah Complex, where Cyclops wanted Wolverine to hunt down Mystique and make sure she doesn't pose any more problems for the X-Men again. While I suppose this could have maintained a series, much like how Adrian Monk or Richard Kimball are searching for one person and that is the crux of the ongoing series, I don't think anyone would have wanted the premise of Wolverine's solo title to be he's searching for Mystique to make sure she doesn't screw over the X-Men again. After the conclusion of this arc, we jump forward 50 or 60 years into the future, with a story by Mark Millar called Old Man Logan. This story is about an older Wolverine who has settled down and is raising a family after the death of all of the superheroes. Old Wolverine has to go on a quest to get some money so that he can pay rent to the Hulk's grandchildren. A series featuring an old Wolverine having adventures in the Marvel Universe that is more hostile than the one we know, that might have worked, but that wasn't what Mark Millar was doing. He was doing a single story, and the premise of Old Man Logan, as it is given to us, is one that could only sustain a single story. I feel like I'm in danger of spinning my wheels here, so I'm going to wrap this thing up. Essentially, I want to feel like there's an actual reason for Wolverine to have a solo series. Wolverine, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., or Wolverine, Protector of the Savage Land, or Wolverine, Crime Lord of Madripoor. Any of these ideas could sustain an ongoing series that would last longer than one story arc. I think it also goes without saying that if Wolverine is going to have an ongoing series with an actual premise that can fuel multiple stories, we should probably have a creative team who is interested in staying on Wolverine for longer than one story. Passing off the series like it's a hot potato between Daniel Way, Mark Guggenheim, Jeff Loeb, Jason Aaron, and Mark Millar just isn't going to work. I don't know what the scenario was between these guys. Maybe none of them actually wanted to work on Wolverine longer than one story. Maybe editorial wanted them off the book after they each finished one story arc. I don't really know. But if each of these guys are only invested in the character for one arc, it becomes very difficult for me to care about Wolverine in the long term after one arc. And sure, as a casual reader of Wolverine who doesn't feel obligated to buy every Wolverine story, It sure is nice that if I'm interested in seeing what Aaron, Guggenheim, or Millar did on Wolverine, all I have to do is buy one arc for each of these gentlemen. But I can't see this doing anything for the long-term sales of Wolverine. If someone who hasn't read an X-Men book before sees Wolverine Evolution written by Jeff Loeb, even if they like the story, what is their reaction going to be when the creative team is entirely different and the focus of the book is entirely different in the following month? From 1975 to 1991, Chris Claremont was one of the only creative minds guiding the X-Men. He turned it from a bi-monthly title that nobody cared about to a series with characters and stories that people loved. Wolverine needs someone like that to come in and stay on his title long term. Someone who is willing to give the Wolverine solo series some kind of direction instead of it just being the home to standalone arcs that don't do much in the long term and stories that have meaning after all the creators leave. Basically, I want Wolverine to feel like it matters, which for the last decade it really doesn't seem like it ever has. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, and if you feel like it, you can even do a video response. This is just something that's kind of been bugging me for a while when I was looking at some of the Wolverine stories that I did have, and I noticed that there really didn't seem to be any kind of premise or reason for Wolverine to have his own series beyond it makes Marvel lots of money. So that's all I have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you guys next time with something else.